Hey, everybody, welcome back. Today's conversation is for anybody who is chasing excellence, but also quietly wondering if that ladder that they're climbing is really actually leaning up against the right wall. My guest today is Kyle McDowell, former Fortune 10 executive who has led over 15,000 employees and now Wall Street Journal and US Today's best-selling author of the book Begin with We. Kyle's story is interesting not because he made it, but because he walked away from the traditional definition of success and built a completely different model of leadership, one rooted in principles, accountability, and something that most people talk about, but very few people actually practice: responsibility to others. So this conversation is it's going to be about it is not going to be about hacks or hustle, but it is going to be about identity. It's about culture, and it's about what leadership actually costs if you're doing it right. If you ever felt the tension between winning and being whole, then this episode is for you. So welcome to the show.
Christopher, I do 6 or maybe up to 8 podcasts a month. That was the coolest introduction I've ever received. The ladder, climbing the corporate ladder only to wonder if it's leaning against the wrong wall, was profound, dude. So it's great to be here. Thank you for the really, really generous introduction. Thrilled to spend some time with you today.
Every moment tests you. Every action defines you. This is the prestigious initiative where mindset becomes muscle and character becomes legacy. I'm Chris Bean, martial artist, coach, and relentless believer in growth. If you're here to sharpen your edge, lead with integrity, and build a life that echoes beyond your years, you're home. You can find the podcast on social media at Prestigious.Pod. You can find me at Chris Bean Official, and the email for the podcast is prestigiousinitiative@gmail.com. Now, Kyle, why would somebody want to listen to our conversation here today?
Well, I think your introduction said a lot to that end. So I'm not special. I'm not unique as it relates to my background and career. Like so many of us, I think probably I would venture to bet nearly every member of your audience entered the workplace in a similar way that I did. A lot of eagerness, optimism. I wanted to make a big impact. But as you mentioned in the introduction, there was a direct correlation with the higher that I climbed in the corporate world to the amount of apathy I felt and kind of disconnection that I felt with the work that I was doing over time. And I don't think that's unique. I think the machine, if you will, has a way of kind of grinding us to a point where that desire for impact is almost exclusively replaced with something more like a hamster wheel. And we just get on that wheel and keep spinning, running as hard and fast as we can, but never really taking time to do a little reflection and self-assessment. Like, is this what I set out to do? And am I using my potential to its absolute best? Which is, tough question to ask and answer, but I think it's a long-winded way of saying, for members of your audience, I think there's probably a connection or a relation, at least, with the path that I was on, and maybe there's an opportunity to consider a different path or a different option for you as it relates to your career. And then for me, man, making really dramatic changes in my career had untold, unexpected, profound impacts on my personal life as well, which is something I never anticipated.
Well, and you went from a tiny cubicle leading, from that tiny cubicle to leading tens of thousands of people. At what point along that journey did you realize that success wasn't the same as fulfillment? To talk about different paths.
Yeah, wow. Really also well framed. It was probably just into the second decade. So year 22, 23. I had kind of checked most of the professional boxes, the air quote success criteria that I had established for myself. And I thought the bigger titles, the bigger roles, bigger compensation, wider spans of authority would provide a sense of fulfillment that I just never really found. And don't get me wrong, man, I made some really important connections in my life and really proud of a lot of the work that I did. I think the question should have been asked a long time ago was, are you delivering the results and having the impact that you want to have in the way that is something you can look back at and say, man, I kind of built a leadership legacy, or, I can point to an organization or a group of people that are better off for having known me. And The truth is, the answer wouldn't have been favorable. So lucky for me, I discovered a different path into that second decade that changed my approach to leadership. And you highlighted it in the introduction, and that's, you can have a balance of humanity and still have impact as a leader. Unfortunately, so many of us are just products of the environment that we were raised in the workplace. And I just happened to be in a workplace environment throughout the bulk of those 20 years, the first 20 years, where, banging your fist on the desk was normal. Raising your voice at somebody was normal. So naturally it made sense that I would behave that way as well. Until I didn't. And that was a conscious choice.
And along that journey, did you ever think, I wonder if there's another way, if this isn't the only way to be a leader, to have this impact on the people?
Yeah, well, so I asked a very similar question. When my apathy reached its probably absolute boiling point was maybe year 22 or so. And I started to ask a lot of questions. I asked questions of folks that I felt as if they were my confidant. Turned out what I thought was respect was really only fear, which is a real gut punch. But of all the questions that I asked, there was one question very similar to the way you framed it. And is there a better way? Is there a better way? I had what I felt was a recipe for success. And again, the means or the method to achieve that success, not always the best example of a really impactful leader, for sure. But I knew at this point in my career, I just had this inkling that there was a better way. I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know where to find it. But I knew the role that I was in at the time and the apathy I was feeling was so strong that I had to make some changes. So I left. I left that role, and I wasn't, and still not independently wealthy. I wasn't retiring. I knew I had to go back. I just was at a fortunate point of my career where I could take a few weeks off, maybe a couple months. It turned out to only be about 10 days. On day 11, I got a phone call asking about a role, would I be interested in discussing, and ultimately took that role. And that was my new canvas. It was a chance for me to lead in a way that I hadn't led before. I just still didn't know what it meant until I was about 60 days into the role. And the night before I was going to address the top 50 or maybe 60 leaders of the organization, I just started to replay scenarios throughout the previous 20 years where I had bosses leave me feeling as if I was a means to an end, that I really didn't have a unique sense of value on this team, that I was a lever that he or she could pull for their own success. And then I had a few experiences of really impactful leaders, 2 or 3, that to this day motivate and inspire me, and I'm grateful for their help along my path. And I just started thinking, well, we're going to do that, or we're not going to do that. So instead of creating this massive PowerPoint, which would have been the approach for the previous 2 decades, I ended up with 10 sentences. And I thought, well, these feel like principles to me. And each of them did and still do begin with the word we. Because at this point, my career was essentially me focused. My next promotion, my raise, the cool titles, the sexy corner offices, all these things. But with these 10 sentences, I was able to communicate and connect with these leaders the next day in ways that really surprised me. I didn't make it a mandate. It wasn't a manifesto. I just said, hey, you guys, these are the 10 principles that I would like you to hold me accountable to, which was a very different approach for me. It's usually, I'm here to help you. I'm here to save you. And here's what I expect of you. So that was a change in approach. And then over the next several months and even years, this organization transformed in ways that I don't think anyone ever saw coming. But more impactful to me was watching the bosses of that organization genuinely transform into leaders, people that actually care about the person to their left and right and what they do. And that just convinced me that this better way was through what is known as principle-based leadership. I didn't create the term. It's just something I wasn't familiar with. And it occurred to me where most of us struggle or fail in our leadership game, if you will, is we fail to set expectations for behavior as emphatically as we set expectations for performance. It's usually all about the KPIs. Here are the numbers we must achieve. Here are the targets. Go get them. And then we just wonder why people behave in ways that is not becoming. So for me, leaning into the behavioral expectations as hard as performance, it has unlocked a level of impact and fulfillment that I missed the first 2 decades.
And what do you think it was about those we statements that connected or resonated so well with the people that were hearing those?
I think it was largely the fact that they'd never heard a guy or a gal in my shoes come in and speak with that type of vernacular. It's always, at least I can speak for myself, in a similar environment in years prior, I would have said a lot about myself, my background, why I was the right guy for the role I was in and the path that I was hoping to take us. Instead, I just said, here's what you should expect from me. And just know I'm going to expect the same from you. But if you want the 10 we's to be the 12 we's, they can be. I don't care. They could be the 5 we's. But the point here is we must establish a baseline for how we expect to treat each other behind the scenes, first and foremost. And this, I think it's pretty obvious. We just forget about it. But if we're high functioning behind the curtain and our team is aligned in what it is we're trying to achieve, how we're trying to achieve it, more importantly, our customers feel that. They feel that we're high functioning behind the scenes. Likewise, if we're dysfunctional and it's, kind of a Lord of the Flies environment behind the scenes, they'll feel that as well. So I just leaned hard into this notion that let's clean up behind the scenes first. We had some silos and we had some dysfunction here and there. It wasn't toxic. But I just had this notion that if we were to focus on each other first, the results would come. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody who would disagree with the notion that if we can focus on each other and how we treat each other and our expectations of one another, I don't think anyone would say, well, that's a bad idea. But it's rarely very intentional. Like the leader will come in and just say, here's, let's act with integrity and let's be accountable, really, really buzzword type adjectives that are really hard to observe. And people have different interpretations of those things. So I think it was just being real and open. And I think number one of all the reasons why it started to take hold was I had to model it. Nobody cares what you say as a boss or a leader. They really don't. They might act like they do, but they really care about your actions, your behaviors, and do they align with your words? And that's when trust can follow.
Well, and you talked about the connection between the behind the scenes and the front, and how the customers can kind of feel if the behind the scenes is not where it should be or doesn't match the front. And I think that, and you mentioned this a little bit in the beginning, where that same type of connection also happens on a personal level. So, for example, if the CEO of the company or the high level manager of a company is not doing so well at home, if their home life is out of balance, and maybe balance isn't the right word, but it isn't moving in the right direction, if they're not continuing to advance themselves, if they're not learning new things and challenging themselves in that way, then probably, more than likely, not only perhaps is their performance at the business going to be minimal or diminished, but also the business performance will be minimal or diminished. There's a connection there. Right. And I think that connection is not only on an individual side, but is on a team side. So if the team can't work well together, if they can't get along, or they're yelling at each other behind the scenes, it doesn't matter what the front looks like, because everybody can see through that. It's so easy to see that. But if they can line up the back end and get everybody on the same page and work on those principles, like you said, and then not only just hear them, but have a leader that is fulfilling them and leading by example, then they can follow that example. They can do that. And then the whole business, not only themselves, the back end of the business, the teamwork of the business, but the actual business itself can grow as well.
Well said. And you leaned into something that I think is often overlooked, and because we expect people to show up to the workplace 100% every day. And that's just not realistic. We all have baggage. We all have issues at home. There's things that, that absolutely stand in the way of us bringing our best every single day. And you mentioned how that impacts the team. If I have a dysfunctional home life or a toxic home life, certainly it's impossible that I leave that entirely behind when I step in the workplace. The team feels it, and vice versa. If we're in a toxic, dysfunctional environment in the workplace, it's almost always often at some way, shape, or form felt in our home lives. At least it was for me. My work led to a divorce. Now, it wasn't the only thing, but it was certainly a contributing factor. My health has been impacted by my work, just not taking care of myself, being on too many airplanes, just the things that we all kind of take for granted. So there's absolutely a connection between the two, which is, by the way, why I thought it was important for one of the 10 we's to be, and it's we number 6, we pick each other up. It's foolish to think that every day everybody's going to be their best. So we have to be in an environment where our peers pick each other up when someone's down, pick up the slack maybe here and there every now and then, because we know that that person, when the shoes or the roles are reversed, shoes on the other foot, they're going to do the same for us. And for the leader, it's non-negotiable. That's something we always must look for, and that's how we pick others up and propel them to new heights, even if they want to grow and do other things.
Now, as it relates to leaders, I think leaders I think leaders tell themselves a lot of lies in order to get through to the next day or to the next hour sometimes.
Yeah.
In your experience, what do you think is the biggest lie that leaders believe, not just tell, but they actually believe about themselves?
Wow. Fantastic question. Um, well, you know who else lies is not only is our most bosses, and I try to be careful with the word usage because to me, a boss is very different than a leader. Um, a boss is going to either tell themselves a lot of lies, or not even ask the question to give themselves an opportunity to be reflective enough to even be dishonest with themselves. Um, and the same is true of the teams that we lead. They're gonna tell us what they think we want to hear. That's how it is. In most environments, it doesn't have to be that way. That's why one of our principles is we challenge each other. Look, I learned this. It took me a while to realize it, but the higher you ascend in any organization or in your career in general, your jokes get funnier somehow. And people want to spend more time with you telling you things that they think you want to hear to endear themselves to you because you have a role in their compensation or in their next promotion or whatever. So there's a question that I mentioned earlier. I started to ask myself over and over: is there a better way? That was almost always followed by, what is it like, or what would it be like to be led by me? And that's a question that and I was thankfully at the time honest with myself and said, I don't know that I would want to be led by me. My style, my kind of results at all costs approach, my lack of kind of empathy in those days. So I think that's a question a lot of leaders, if they ask themselves, would expose an opportunity to lead differently or be a little more human in their approach to leadership. But I, with respect, I almost reject the question because I think a lot of leaders lie to themselves by not even asking themselves the self-reflective type questions to open the door for growth. Does that make sense?
It does, because
Yeah.
they're not even willing to look in that area because they know they're so deficient that they can't. They just look away.
Yeah, and for some folks, I'm not certain that it is malice or even a lack of caring. I think we just get conditioned on this machine or in this machine. I said the hamster wheel earlier, called a treadmill, whatever you like, that this lather, rinse, repeat mindset replaces the desire for impact and fulfillment. And it's natural. We're going to spend, on average in the US, we work about 100,000 hours of our lifetime. So it's impossible to not get in some type of rut or habits that encourage you or entice you or pull you away from your best and highest purpose. And I know I did. I'll speak for me that I never took the time to have that reflection to reground what I wanted to do when I first entered the workplace, at least for the first 20 years. Then I finally found that bit of reflection, as I mentioned, early into that, I guess, third decade. But you got to ask the questions. Otherwise the hamster wheel will just keep spinning.
Okay, so I've seen this in since we've been talking. I can see that you had an identity shift in your leadership style, and I think that a lot of times leaders will fail, not necessarily because they lack the skills to continue leading, but because they have an identity problem.
Yeah.
And you were able to correctly identify that and then do something about it. If there's a leader that's listening to this that may be feeling a nudge that they need to make a shift and have that identity change because they may have an identity problem, it's not necessarily their fault because it's all the leaders that we've had up till there that we're just trying to emulate. We don't know any better sometimes. But if there's a leader that's listening to this, they can feel the nudge that they may need that shift. What would be some advice that you could give them to help them on that path?
I think that we need to be honest in that a transition or a transformation like this, it sounds simple in theory in that I just need to do more of this or less of that, or whatever was identified on the last engagement survey that said, that wasn't favorable, or at least the team I lead views me as unfavorable, whatever those characteristics that are often kind of uncovered in the classic corporate engagement survey. It sounds simple to make these changes, but it is, I guess, in some ways, but it's not easy. And that's very different. Like, for example, a lot of things in our lives are simple, but not easy. The equation to lose weight, pretty simple. Just burn more calories, take in fewer. Everybody's special and has their own ratio there, right? But the fact is, it's simple, but it's not easy. Just about anything in life worth having requires overcoming one or more challenges. So to think that you could pivot your approach to leadership and it not be tougher is foolhardy. It's going to be harder. You're going to have to spend more time and energy on the things that you probably have under-indexed in terms of your time spent. So that realization is important. But if you're feeling that tugging, I think it's important to find the time and space to have a deeper conversation with yourself, or someone that will give it to you straight. I just happen to for me, I call it the mirror of truth. My mirror of truth it started at like many years ago, 6, 7 a.m. by myself, my chance to just spend some quiet time asking myself those same questions that we talked about earlier. What's it like to be led by me? Now I ask questions like, did I make good on my commitments yesterday? If my mother, who's been gone for more than a dozen years, were to see me behave in that one-on-one, would she be proud? Find that point of self-reflection and ask yourself questions that you've not taken the time to ask. And many people do this and then come to the realization that the effort required, that juice ain't worth the squeeze. And I get it, man. I get it. I respect that. If it makes more sense for you to keep your head down, keep on the hamster wheel, and continue to collect the paycheck because of the commitments you have, respect. I get it. However, if you are interested in finding fulfillment and impact well beyond the KPIs and any tenure at any organization you might have, I would think long and hard about what it might take for you to get there. And just know that whatever path you choose, for me, it's principle-based leadership, being really explicit about my behavioral expectations for myself as well as others, which gives me a bar to hold myself accountable to, which makes it easier to hold others accountable. I think that is for me, it's been a foolproof approach, but it's not flawless. I struggle with it most days. But with that understanding, if one of the principles is we own our mistakes and we pick each other up, I want to surround myself with people that'll do the same for me. So the days that I am not living up to my best, or maybe I behaved in a way that's contrary to any one of my principles, then I expect to be called out for it. And I expect it to be diplomatic, and I expect them to give me grace, because those are all the same reactions I would give to them. Chris, that's a long-winded way of saying self-reflect. If that tugging's coming your way, have a little self-reflection. Am I living up to my highest and best potential? Do I have an opportunity to have a greater impact, find more fulfillment? And if so, how do I get from here to there? And that's unique to each of your audience members.
Okay, let's move to your book here. We begin with we. You've teased out a couple of them already. Can you share those 10 we statements, those 10 we principles that you talked about on that stage?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I'll fly through it. So the first is the most fundamental, non-negotiable of all the 10 we's, and it's we do the right thing, always. And I never leave off that one word, second sentence. It's intentional. It's always. We can disagree what the right thing is. We can choose something that's less optimal, but still the right thing. But the point here is we will never approach any decision, any adversity, any challenges with anything other than the right thing in mind. And that could mean any number of things, but we're not going to cut corners. We're not going to compromise our integrity. We're going to do the right thing as a collective group. And in my book, I talk the reader through a different couple of kind of fishbone or filters to help land on the right thing. But of course, it's subjective to every location or whatever it is that you do. But if I'm going to be known as doing as someone who is always focused on doing the right thing, I got to lead by example. And that's we number 2. We lead by example. It's not reserved just for someone in a position of authority. We're all leading every single day, every moment of every day. The question is not, am I leading by an example? The question is, am I leading by an example I would be proud to see replicated? Which is a very different question. And sometimes the answer is a little less flattering. Um, Now, if I'm focused on leading by example, then I gotta be good with my commitments, and that's we number three. We say what we're going to do, and then we do it. And again, not reserved for anyone in authority. Every member of the team, when we make a commitment to one another, we're going to deliver on that. When we make a commitment to those we serve externally, of course, we're going to deliver on that. But what happens inside of a lot of organizations, especially when there's like cross-functional dependency where one group is required to deliver something to another group before it goes to a customer, like we don't have that same sense of customer service behind the scenes. If you committed to get something to me by Tuesday of next week, I expect to have it. And likewise, it's just as important for the boss. And that level of accountability is rare. The boss can make commitments and not deliver, and people just kind of move on about their day. But if I'm going to do that, I've got to lean into we number four. We take action. Every team within every organization in the world is aware of things that are suboptimal, but rarely does any team member raise their hand to say, hey, boss, we got this gnarly problem over there, because it usually means more work, rarely means more money. So we just kind of subscribe to mediocre or mediocrity. And if we want to be seen as excellent and we're striving for excellence, brother, we have got to take action against those things that are holding us back from excellence. If people are committed to taking action, we got to be ready for we number, where I'm at, 5. We own our mistakes. Mistakes are fuel for growth. And if a member of the team is making a mistake, it's possible, if not likely, that someone else on the team is making the same mistake. We can't get better if we don't know they're out there. So we got to be in a scenario, an environment where people say, I blew it, including the boss. I blew it, because that's what teams do. They admit opportunities to get better. Now, if we want our teams to raise their hand and say, I made a mistake, that's when we number 6 that I mentioned earlier comes into play. We pick each other up. It's like, we're going to be tough on the problems, not tough on the person that made the mistake. Now, if they're habitual issues, that's different, right? I'm not saying we remove accountability by any means, but we're going to pick each other up. The leader has an obligation to pick someone up, take them to new heights as well. They want your job, create shadowing opportunities. They want to leave your team to go somewhere else. When you show interest in that, do you think they work less hard? When they show you're committed to them, not as a member of the team, but as a human on their path to growth and development, a connection is made. We number 7 is we measure ourselves by outcomes, not activity. The real world cares about outcomes, not minimizing the importance of activity. I just think activity should always be purposeful and intentionally aligned with our goals. In a lot of places, meetings are way too easy to call. And we sit in meetings over and over. And then we have a meeting to talk about the meeting. And then we'll schedule a meeting to talk about the meeting that we're going to have. And before you know it, we're pulled away from the reason that we're here, and we're just spending time. And then it starts to feel self-fulfilling, and we feel as if we're making progress because we're so busy, but our outcomes aren't there. So we just got to be in a position where everyone's focused on the outcomes. We number 8, my favorite of all the principles, is we challenge each other diplomatically. And I never leave off that one word second sentence as well. Challenges must be grounded in either data or experience. And as a member of every single team who is embracing these principles, peers are not allowed to. They are obligated to challenge each other. Members of the team are obligated to challenge the boss. That boss is obligated to challenge someone higher, because if we don't, we're not striving for excellence. We're accepting mediocrity. It's like the way we've always done it. Challenges are fuel for growth. Challenges without we number 9 is a recipe for chaos. We number 9 is we embrace challenge. Whether it's challenges from someone within the team, the boss, wherever, including market pressures, issues from outside the company, whatever external, we're going to look them in the eye. We're not going to sugarcoat them. We're not going to act like they're not there, but we are going to be galvanized by them. We're not going to shy away from them, because as we overcome adversity, we get tighter. And the next round of adversity that faces us, or that we face, it's like, we've been through this. We can get through this. We're going to embrace this challenge together. Not one of us, no superstars. We're going to do it together. And then the last principle is we number 10, we obsess over details. And I think details are often what separates a company or an individual leader or a member of a team from someone that's not quite at their level. It's our obsession with our brand, our personal brand, our professional brand, our organization brand. And when we obsess over details, it just sends a little message to those we serve. We care. We care a little bit more about maybe the person that is down the street doing the same thing that we do. And we're going to make sure that you feel that obsession with details. And it's these little things that stack up to be much more important, not only behind the curtain, but also to those we serve externally. So those are the 10 we's.
Now, as you were sitting down, putting those together,
did
you think through any hierarchy for them? So basically, I'm asking, are they in any specific order, or are they just out there?
It's a great question. The night I wrote them, they were not in this order.
Mm.
But as I started putting the book together, it occurred to me that they are kind of a flywheel. That if I do the right thing, then I have to be leading by example. If I'm leading by example, then I am making good on my commitments. It's the best way to lead by example. And it just kind of made sense when I started to think through how I was going to walk the reader through. And they've never changed since then.
Now, as somebody's reading the book, you're the author, you designed this. What is the outcome you want to leave the reader with? What is the hopeful thing that they either do, put into practice, or adapt from your book into their reality?
Yeah, my hope is, because the hope and the outcome are often different. My hope is it opens eyes to a better way. It opens eyes to at least for me, and now at this point, having sold as many copies as we've had, and I hear from readers almost daily now, it exposes something that we were never taught when we moved into a position of authority, when we became a boss, and that is establishing expectations for behavior, the standards that we hold so true, that they're non-negotiable and they're observable. And it's occurred to me that so many organizations think that their mission statement or their corporate values have anything to do with behavior behind the scenes, and they don't. They simply don't. Which is why we have to have these very observable, explicit expectations for behavior, so we can live those values. So my hope is it exposes a better way. It perhaps exposes a gap that maybe has never been considered, or if it has been considered, maybe the solution hasn't been quite as obvious. That's the hope. The outcome, if I'm so lucky, is these principles. They've already created a bit of momentum. I've worked with some massive organizations and some really small ones as well. And the outcome is they become part of the organization's vernacular. They become almost like a cultural currency where everybody has the same amount in their account and they're free to spend it, however they choose. That's the goal. That is the ideal outcome. It doesn't always work out that way, because we talked about simple versus easy. And a lot of times people approach, and I love something you said at the very beginning, Christopher. It's not about hacks. It's not. Hack is a very different approach, very different thing than this. But a lot of people in this, for whatever reason, probably social media being the biggest, they're looking for the next hack to change something. And it just doesn't exist in this world, in this space, I should say.
Now, okay, so speaking from a organization type of mindset, if I am a middle manager and I get your book and I love it and I want to suggest it to the higher up, or to adopt it as a company policy, or create our own principles like that, what would be some advice that you would give to that person?
Number one, do not wait for someone else to give you the authority or empower you to lead this way. I've yet to meet any level of manager, executive, from C-suite to first-time leader say, boy, I don't want teams that do the right thing, lead by example, take action, pick each other. Like, don't wait for someone to endorse that for you, because it's not coming. We often wait for some cultural transformation initiative or someone to give us, like you say, another hack or even a book. That's not how this works. It has to be personal to you. It has to be authentic to you, and to get someone else there, like your boss, is a hard thing. It's awful. It's awful awkward to say, hey, I came across this approach to leadership that's really impactful to me, and you might want to try it. It just doesn't usually go well if it's coming from someone that reports to you. Now, if you have a relationship with them that allows you to be that transparent, that's a beautiful thing, and that's how momentum can really gather. In the absence of that connection or that opportunity, take it upon yourself to lead differently, lead in a way that allows you to be the leader you never had, and create what I call leadership legacy. But don't wait for somebody else. You got to get going on your own, recognize it's going to be hard, be open and transparent with the team that you lead, and that, hey, we're going to try a different approach here, and I expect you to hold me accountable, because likewise, I'm going to do the same too and with you. But just showing up and saying, I read this book, or I listened to this podcast, and here's who we are now. I think it works, I guess, but it really only is sustained if they see you, the leader, living it, not just talking about it.
And so really the approach would be to buy the book, read the book, and then put it into action for yourself. And then if or when somebody asks about it, then you can share it with them. But otherwise, you take whatever team that you're leading and lead this way because you find value in it. You think that these principles are upstanding and something that is beneficial for you and your team. So you live it out and let them kind of, ask you about, hey, how is your team performing so good? What are you doing
That's it.
different?
That's it. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. Well said.
Okay, so let's get down to it. What does it look like to come in on Monday morning after having read your book and start putting some of these principles into action? Like, what does that leadership actually look like? What is a step that they could make to move in that direction?
First, no, it's going to be awkward. It will be awkward because it's unlikely that you've approached a one-on-one or difficult conversation and started that conversation by saying, hey, Christopher, we pick each other up, right? Or, hey, Christopher, we challenge each other, right? This is going to be a tough conversation, but we pick each other up. So here's my goal. Establishing those expectations, not only at a more macro level, but for every interaction. Let's start the conversation with an understanding of what it is we're trying to accomplish during this conversation. So when you start to insert words that you haven't used before, and words matter a lot, especially if you're trying to drive change, behavior matters more, obviously, but words matter a lot. Just know that it's going to be awkward and people are going to look at you a little differently. And when I led this way for the first time, I remember peers of mine saying I was corny, because I was really leaning hard into behavior instead of just numbers, which was different. And in most environments, it is different. So it's going to be difficult. It's going to be awkward. I can't answer the question much more than that. And here's why. I don't know the legacy that you've built to date. I don't know how your team views you on Friday before you left. So I don't know how they're going to react on Monday if you approach these things differently. And a question I often get, which is really connected to this, is, okay, let's pretend everybody's bought in. How long until we start to really see it manifested in the results that we deliver? And my answer to that is, I don't know, because I don't know how committed you are to it. I don't know how authentically it's being delivered. I just don't know enough to answer those questions. But I will tell you this: your level of resilience and commitment to living out your standards every single day, even if you never say them, it's impossible that you don't earn a sense of respect and, more importantly, trust that you didn't have before, because everyone's watching you. You know this. Every person in a position of authority, they lead 1 or 15,000. That group of people is watching to see how you behave, and more specifically, they're watching to see if your behavior aligns with the words that you say. And is that behavior consistent with your expectations of their behavior? So no leadership gap. Everybody's on the same page, expected to behave the same. Every member of your team is looking to see if that's who you are and what you do. So the point here is, you have to commit, give grace to yourself, and allow others an opportunity to call out when you stray. But over time, living those values, living those principles over and over again will create a momentum that will surprise you.
Well, I think that talks about or touches on rather the culture of the business or the team that you, right. And if you're the leader, you've created this culture.
Right.
With that in mind, do you think there are behaviors that kill quietly, perhaps, or even overtly kill the cultures that we're trying to prepare or they're trying to create?
Absolutely. Yeah. The biggest two things come to mind when we have two standards, one for the boss or a leadership group and one for the other half, the haves and have-nots. So these double standards of what's good for me is not good for you and vice versa it's not a team, and it creates animosity, and ultimately it drives apathy at the team member level, because why should I behave in a certain way that delivers on these values or trying to achieve this culture of excellence if the person to whom I report is not even doing the same? So that disconnect is huge. But I'll say what really is probably more detrimental, well, as equally detrimental to a culture, or will begin a cultural decline, is not what we do, but it's what we don't do. Not holding people accountable to the same standard, right? So if we expect to be in an environment where, all things are equal, all people are equal, we all have this same expectation for behavior, but when the boss selectively enforces that or selectively rewards that, there's no reason to follow. There's no reason to commit because the message is sent that it's convenient. Only do it when it's convenient. More specifically, if we have a member of the team who is performing really, really well, but as a jackass, then we need to call them out on that if they're behaving in any way contrary to our stated standards. It's not often done though. We look the other way because the results are good, or we kind of turn a cheek to inappropriate or unprofessional behavior, or not team driven or team oriented behavior because that person's special because of their results. Well, that sends a message to everybody else that our standards differ and we're not one team. So that's, I think what we don't do is just as impactful as what we do.
We're getting close here. So I don't want to leave without asking this on a personal note for you, because you've had such this big journey. What does leadership look like for you now in your own life outside of the boardroom, after knowing where you come from, the whole journey that you're on? What does it look like for you now?
Man, I realized at the beginning of this kind of decade of my leadership transformation, if you will, and I don't mean to sound too corny or woo-woo, but I am much more conscious and intentional about how I lead. And I think, and I mentioned this earlier, the most unexpected, profound impact was establishing standards for myself outside of the workplace. I was corporate Kyle and then not corporate Kyle. And I didn't hold myself to any type of standards. Sure. I mean, I was disciplined in certain things, in certain aspects of my life, and could obviously, I think we could all be more disciplined in many areas of our lives, regardless of the time that the questions are asked. I learned that you can call me a lot of things, and I don't get offended easily, but I do not take well to being called a hypocrite. So when I realized that I was behaving a certain way inside the workplace, once I had found these principles and started consciously and intentionally leading with them in mind, I was not doing it outside the workplace. And it occurred to me, you hypocrite. You pride yourself on authenticity. You pride yourself on being real and relatable. Then that can't be two different identities. So for me, that was a massive challenge. And in the back of my mind, because I talk about the principles so often because of what I do for a living now, but more importantly, I genuinely believe that they have a place in so many worlds, not just the workplace, but our personal lives as well. That if I find myself, they're always kind of front of mind. If I find myself behaving in a way that's not consistent with them, I check myself. Like if I didn't put a plate back on the rack, if I'm in a gym, I can't walk out like that because I know it's not doing the right thing. I can't not return my grocery cart to the cart corral or back up to the front of the store because I know it's not the right thing. I used to, but that hypocrite word bounces around so strong now and so often that it just kind of forces me to do my best, at least, to hold myself accountable.
Well, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much, because you help to remind not only me, but also the listeners that real leadership isn't about really being impressive. It's about being responsible. It's not about how many people you report to. It's about how many people are better because of you. And Kyle, your message really, it cuts through the noise that is out there in the leadership world today. And principles over popularity, standards over slogans, we over me. And really the uncomfortable truth is this, that you don't become a we-oriented leader by learning more. You become one by unlearning parts of yourself that are still needing that validation. And Kyle, as we're wrapping up, my question for you is, do you have any key thoughts or final takeaways that you would like to leave the listeners with? And if they would like to get in contact with you to learn more about you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, it's kind of you to offer. So I didn't want to go much further without expressing my gratitude. Thank you again for the chance to kind of spread the message and again, share where I can be found. So essentially every social media platform is the same handle. It's Kyle McDowell Inc. And then my website is kylemcdowellinc.com. The book is Begin With We. It's available wherever books are sold. Seems like Amazon's the fastest way to get it and usually the best price. But it's available wherever books are sold. And nothing comes to mind that we haven't touched on. You're really good at this. You asked a wide range of questions that allowed me to kind of meander and maybe wander at times. But Maybe I would go back to the one question that started it all for me, and is there a better way? And if you can ask that question and be really honest with yourself about, is there a better way to approach this thing called work that we're going to do for, like I said, around 100,000 hours of our life, then it might be worth exploring. That doesn't mean it'll be easy. That doesn't mean it's going to be self-evident. Doesn't mean it's going to be, I say these are things that we have to focus on, not just every day, but every interaction with those that we lead and our peers alike. But if you're curious if there is a better way, I'd like to think that I've uncovered one, and it's through this principle-based leadership, and specifically the 10 weaves.
Very good. And listeners, I want to leave you with this. Here's the real question I want you to sit with after this episode. Are you building a life where you look successful? Or are you building one where people around you actually thrive? Because titles fade, achievements expire, but the way that you lead yourself and others leaves a trail. And that trail is the real legacy. So stay dangerous, not with ambition, but with responsibility.